Hi guys, thanks for joining me today. We are going to talk about intensity zones and then different kind of different sort of purposes for training at different intensity zones, different ways to do it, and then maybe how you measure it as well too. So basically, the way that I sort of split things up, and a lot of other people from an endurance perspective split things up, is we think about like 7 different intensity zones. So zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, zone 4, zone 5, zone 6, and zone 7. Zone 1 would be our lowest zone. So you can't see it right now, but I'm actually biking. So I'm on a bike right now, pedaling. This, as you can see, I'm talking. It's not raising my breath or anything like that. I am in what I would call zone 1. So, and then basically zone 7 would be all out as hard as I can. It would be a sprint, probably something like 10 seconds or less or something like that. And then every other zone is kind of somewhere in between essentially. And so it's really important to learn about the different intensity zones, because as a athlete, you or a client, or we're all athletes, I think, and you want to know what you should be doing, what type of intensity you should be working at, what are the benefits of it, and how long can you expect to hold it as well too, essentially. So let's talk about it. So what I want to talk about is I want to talk about the RPE scale. And basically the RPE is a rated perceived level of exertion scale. And so that is it's really kind of like the simplest way to think about your zones and your intensities. And the reason why it's the simplest is you don't need a heart rate monitor. You don't need to measure blood lactate. You don't need to, look at a whole bunch of crazy things. All you do is you go, how hard am I working on a scale of 1 to 10? And it's actually been scientifically proven that it's super accurate. Obviously, the more you train and the more you exercise, the more accurate it's going to be, because you're really going to kind of know sort of where your zones are. But even for beginners, you guys will know what a 1 out of 10 is and what a 10 out of 10 is, basically. And so that's kind of what I want to go through here. Is I want to go through the different zones and then the RPE scales with that, and then we'll talk a little bit about kind of some different sort of performance things as well too. So here's what I kind of have for you guys. You'll see this. You may have seen this in our spin room, and we have these. And I'll get Chelsea and Cassandra to send this out to you guys as well too. But you can see here, there's zone 1 all the way to zone 7, and then right beside that is an RPE scale, that rated perceived level of exertion scale. So a 1 to 2 out of 10 is going to be your zone 1. A 3 to 4 out of 10 is a zone 2. A 5 to 6 out of 10 is a zone 3. A 7 to 8 out of 10 is a zone 4. A 9 out of 10 is a zone 5. A 10 out of 10 is a zone 6, and then a 10 plus is kind of a zone 7. And so those are sort of those different again perceived level of exertions. And then they're all sort of challenging different energy systems. So people will talk about aerobic exercise, they'll talk about anaerobic exercise, they'll talk about anaerobic capacity, and they'll talk about anaerobic power. And then so we'll go through that a little bit as well too, so you guys get a good idea of what that is and maybe kind of why that benefits it. So when you are training in your aerobic zone, you are going to be choosing fat more as a fuel source. You can usually go longer in your aerobic zone, and aerobic just simply means that you're delivering energy to your muscles with the presence of oxygen. So we need oxygen in order to create that energy for our muscles to contract, essentially. And so our aerobic zones are going to be our zones 1, 2, and 3. It's aerobic. I call this tempo, but you're still also in an aerobic zone, essentially. So you're still really kind of utilizing oxygen for the most part to develop your energy to contract muscles. And so basically what that means is if it's aerobic, you should be able to breathe. So we should be able to breathe. We should be able to breathe pretty comfortably. You may feel your breathing increase while you're doing it, but you should be able to breathe. Simple things with the zone 1 and the zone 2, we call it the talk test. You should be able to talk in those zones. So say you are going on a Sunday bike ride, for 60 minutes, you'd probably spend most of that bike ride in zone 1 and zone 2 if it's just a nice, easy stroll. If you said, I'm going to push this bike ride and it's a 60-minute bike ride, if you're really pushing it and your breathing starting to be challenged a little bit, now you're probably getting into that 5, that 6 effort out of 10, and now you're getting into that zone 3 or that or that tempo zone essentially. So you're not really developing a whole bunch of, or increasing our blood lactate to a significant level or to a level that you can't manage it. But once you go above that, that's then where we start to really experience that, we're struggling talking, we're really kind of building up lactate, and what that feels like is it's going to feel like your muscles are burning. So you're going to feel that burning in the muscles. That gets into zone 4. Okay, so that's here in that zone 4. And what zone 4 is that's our anaerobic threshold. So that is the point where we start to go a little bit anaerobic. Our body needs energy, our muscles need energy really fast. In order to get that energy, we're actually doing it without the presence of oxygen because it has to happen faster. And so the byproduct of that, though, is going to be lactate. And then lactate, you're going to feel in your muscles, you're going to feel it burning. So if you were doing a bike, for example, and you were going and you were hitting that zone 4, that threshold, that 7 or that 8 out of 10, what's going to happen there is you're going to start to feel a burning in your legs. And you're really only going to be able to hold that so long. If you were in a race, if you were going all out as hard as you can, usually you could hold that for somewhere between 20 and 40 minutes. When we program workouts, we'll go to that intensity, but we're usually going to be doing intervals of more between 2 to maybe 10 minutes or something like that. And that's just so that you can be successful in achieving it. So that's our threshold. And those are great workouts that are kind of race specific. When we train in zone 3 and zone 4, that makes a really big benefit with running, with running like 5Ks, 10Ks, half marathons, and same thing with with our cycling as far as, maybe doing a bike race or a triathlon or something like that. And so when we go above that, when we go zone 5, when we get into that zone 5, we're starting to become anaerobic now. So now we're 100%, well, not 100%, but you're becoming more anaerobic. Usually if we're zone 5 or at that kind of 9 out of 10, you will see your speed go up. You will see your wattage go up if you guys are riding on a bike. And then you are going to feel it. You are going to feel that lactate accumulate super fast. Zone 5, you're usually probably not holding intervals longer than a minute in zone 5. So probably like 30 seconds to 60 seconds. These ones make a big difference with not necessarily short bursts, but maybe think of like a hill sprint or something like that. So if you had to run up Douglas Park Hill, usually it's going to take you somewhere around that minute. If you had to do that in a race or put that in a race, or you had to sprint finish or something like that in a race, you're going to be tapping into that zone 5, that kind of prolonged anaerobic energy system. A little bit shorter than that, it would be zone 6. And this one is also anaerobic. This is now that 10 out of 10. This is usually probably going to be more like 20 to 30 seconds max, all out effort, as hard as you can go. And that one would maybe be that sprint finish, but it might even be something shorter as far as, like 200 meters on the track or less, 100 meters on the track for a lot of us. And the benefits of this is this one's really gonna start to develop a little bit more power in our body and in our muscles. And that kind of leads me to zone 7, our anaerobic neuromuscular system. This one is kind of like the pure power system. And so this one is basically usually 10 seconds or less, and that one is pure power, pure sprint speed. If you work in zone 7, you can only hold it for 10 seconds, and then in order to repeat it again, you probably are going to need like 3 to 6 minutes recovery in order to kind of tap back into it again. So when we talk about HIIT training and high intensity training, you are going to be training in the anaerobic zones. Depending on the interval, if you're doing a minute interval, you're probably zone 5. If it's a 30-second interval, you're probably zone 6. If it's shorter, then you may even be tapping into that zone 7. But in order to continue tapping into those zones, you need lots of rest. And so these zones, I like to think of this as on the track sprint distances almost, because if you think of that zone 5, you're probably in that minute. You're thinking about like a 400 or an 800 meter runner essentially. So if you do a bunch of training in that zone 5, you're going to be kind of as strong, as powerful as that type of an athlete. When you get into zone 6, you're looking at more probably like that 200 to 400 meter runner and athlete. And training like that does shape our body to be like that. So we develop more muscles. We develop we increase our mitochondrial density. we develop our body's ability to go super anaerobic, basically build up a whole bunch of lactate. And then if we're doing stuff that's super short, that's sort of that 10 seconds, the 60 meter to 100 meter sprints, now you're just a pure power athlete essentially that can really sprint and go. And so hopefully you guys learned something from that. I guess the one thing I should mention, because a lot of people are interested in caloric expenditure, and when you tap into these anaerobic zones, that leaves you in what's called an oxygen deficit, and that will increase your metabolism for up to 2 days after the workouts. When you are doing most of your work in these aerobic zones here, the zone 1 and the zone 2, that one you're gonna you may burn more calories in the hour. So say you did the difference between a workout in an aerobic zone and an anaerobic zone for an hour. The aerobic zone, you may burn more calories because you can work the whole time. The other ones you need to take breaks on. But with those aerobic zones, you're not going to have that boosted resting metabolism afterwards, and you do in the anaerobic zone. So that's kind of the difference. You're also not necessarily building the same power, the same strength, and even the same kind of like fast twitch muscle contractions and muscle fibers. So think about kind of what type of an athlete you want to be, and then sort of decide what type of intensities should I be training at. So I'll share a file with you guys so you guys can see it and enjoy. Kick butt.